Before we begin, I believe in fair and thorough reviews, but I also believe in being honest with my audience. Unfortunately, the Nintendo Switch version of Forgotten Fields has been plagued by game-breaking bugs during my playthrough. These issues have repeatedly crashed my game, preventing my progress, and 3/4 through, I'm unable to finish due to the software crashing. The game was subsequently pulled from the eShop and patched, so I waited to give the game a fair review. Unfortunately, I'm still unable to play now as my save file is stuck on an infinite loading loop. This review reflects a portion I was able to play, but please understand that this is not a complete experience, and I take no joy in writing a negative review, especially for a game that clearly had heartfelt intentions. Being somewhat of a writer myself, I was immediately drawn to Forgotten Fields. It's a story about a struggling novelist trying to rediscover his voice while navigating nostalgia, memory, and personal connection. It's something I can relate to, and pair that with a lo-fi aesthetic and a quieter, more reflective tone, and I felt like it was a kind of game that might not grab headlines, but leave its mark on me and players who also saw themselves in it. Unfortunately, that hope didn't pan out. What's it like? Put on some headphones, sharpen your pencil, and let's try to avoid the writer's block as we review Forgotten Fields on Nintendo Switch. Forgotten Fields plays more like a visual novel with light adventure game elements. There are some moments of exploration, puzzle solving, and interaction, but much of your time is spent watching the scenes unfold, soaking in the atmosphere, and moving Sid from one moment to the next. The opening is actually really interesting, as Sid is in front of his computer, trying his best to hash out his story. As you fill out the prompts and see his thought process happening, the world around the character in the story starts to populate as well, and it actually did a really great job of pulling me into the opening moments. Unfortunately, we rarely see more of that brilliance, as the game ends up reducing to more fetch quests than narrative hooks. Despite this, the game does show signs of something special because it illustrates well what a lot of people feel like in real life, a yearning for that nostalgia for a world we grew up with, even though that world doesn't really exist anymore. When it works, Forgotten Fields knows how to weave a tale, but more often than not, controls feel clunky and unresponsive, and minor mechanics such as throwing rocks to knock a ball from a tree barely function, making many tasks feel tedious. Also, story elements are hindered by frustrating fetch quests like collecting laundry blown off a clothesline, and more emotional scenes can be undercut by stiff animation or awkward character placement as they try to warp into the place where they're meant to be. Forgotten Fields embraces a lo-fi visual style, and for the most part, it works. The environments are stylized with warm tones and a slightly dreamlike quality that complements the game's reflective tone. It's not overly flashy, but it doesn't really need to be. That said, the technical issues again begin to drag things down. The frame rate on the Switch struggles a lot of the time, and the camera, which often tries to sweep into cinematic angles, has a habit of misaligning and more than once buried itself in tree foliage or awkward corners, completely obscuring the action. It's clear the intent was to add visual flair, but the execution often gets in the way of actually playing the game. I made it about 2/3 of the way through the game before it broke. After a cutscene following a beach sequence, your character goes across a bridge and the game crashes. At that point, Forgotten Fields was pulled from the eShop and then a patch was released. So after I re-downloaded the patch, my save was effectively dead with an infinite loading screen showing nothing but clouds. I waited 20 minutes on the screen, I restarted the game, I've tried several times, but the game simply won't work. And that's where my playthrough and this review really ends. Despite the technical problems I faced, I genuinely wanted to see Forgotten Fields through to the end. The story felt like it was building towards something meaningful, maybe even a twist, and I find myself cheering on Sid, hoping he'd be able to finish his book and find some closure along the way. It's not something that every game really achieves. It's important to note that Forgotten Fields was received fairly favourable on other platforms, and I believe there's a worthwhile experience here, just not on the Nintendo Switch, at least in its current state. The game has been developed by a single person, and that effort is clear throughout. There's real talent and promise behind this project, and I hate writing a review like this knowing how much heart most likely went into it. Unfortunately, the Switch version, as of now, is broken. A game-breaking bug has cut my game short, and for anyone considering it on this platform, I can't recommend it in good faith. If a future patch addresses the issue, I'll gladly return to update this review. Until then, Forgotten Fields remains a story I wanted to finish, but simply couldn't. I award it a 20 out of 100. And in the interest of full disclosure, a review copy was provided by the publisher, but this doesn't influence my score. Thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked it, the best way you can support What's It Like is by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends. For more reviews, click on the thumbnails to the right, and for everything Nintendo, check out whatsitlike.com.au.